I was just talking about what a perfect afternoon it is for poetry, for reading poetry. Looking across the lake, Mepamego, I can see the clouds skimming the peak of Bear Mountain, and really it's a right atmosphere and it's a right perfect day. People are coming in, so I'm not rushing. But anyhow, well, by way of an introduction, to start with Fortner Anderson, I mean, he's got such a prolific body of work. I mean, both published and recorded, and well, as his 5 solo CDs, but a lot more than that. He's got tremendous amount of work. But he came to Montreal in '76 from Minneapolis. That's what it is. A young man, and by the mid '80s, he was making sort of more of a presence felt. '85, he had Dial a Poem, and then he had The Heart of the Machine, which he did with Ian Ferrier, and an electronic interactive novel, which is like you see the direction he was taking with that. And then the CKU2 recordings with McGill and so on, the McGill CKUT, that's right. And he won the in 2007 the La Voix Electronique Prize for Lifetime Achievement as a young man. And he was a co-founder, a producer of the venture, the very important and ongoing venture of the Wire on Words, often present in their events. And true performance artist. You can see some of his videos. It's quite amazing how much you can collaborate and present various angles of approaching the poem. And, I think more than any poet I can think of, he really embodies the spoken word. And also, I would say even Carl Olsen's notion of a projective verse. He's that kind of poetry that because it's Considerations is a book that's coming out. It has come out, right? It has come out, and with recordings, 1,000 memories, and then you see the performance that he does with reading 1,000 sentences to the accompaniment of Alex McSween, and I think that's a book. That's a really worthwhile, amazing to just look it up, and you'll see how amazing a thing it is as a production of poetry and words. So now I'd like to also introduce Derek Webster, who I think he's got quite a presence in the really active in the Montreal literary scene, and he's been associated with a number of numerous initiatives, and his book that came out in Véhicule Press, I found extremely. I found it powerful, and I wanted to just read something as a first book of exceptional emotional power, and with exquisitely controlled lyrics that deal introspectively with personal experience. So it's self-probing poems that seek an existential direction. Now, that's how I would say it, and I really appreciate the lyrical voice that he's brought onto our scene. I think he's been involved. He's been written some articles and reviews and so on, and the poems continue to appear in various periodicals and magazines. So now I will let Sonia take over because there's more biographical information. Please enjoy this, and great to see you all. Go ahead.
Thank you, Gabriel. So let me give you a few more notes to add to Gabriel's wonderful introduction. So I will start with Fortner Anderson, who's presented his poetry at the Berlin Poesie Festival, the Universidad Nacional in Bogota, the Banff Center in Alberta, and St. Mark's Church in New York in June of 2002, and again in 2008. He was invited to Genoa in Italy to perform at the 8th and 10th edition of the Genoa International Poetry Festival. In April of 2010, he was featured performer at the Festival de Musique Actuelle à Victoriaville, presenting his poems in the acclaimed multimedia spectacle La Salle des Pas Perdus. From 2016, give me one moment, I lost my space. From 2016, he's presented the 12-hour and 10-minute performance of his work Points of Departure at galleries and festivals in Canada, as well as the Casino Luxembourg Forum d'Art Contemporain. And in early 2019, his media artwork Le Poème Perpétuel was presented at the Galerie Clark in Montreal. His poems have been recorded many times and published widely. In 2017, he was invited by Estuaire magazine to publish 10 new poems. His 5 solo CDs are Sometimes I Think, wow, in 2000, 6 Silk Purses, He Sings, Solitary Pleasures, and Annunciations. Points of Departure, a book encased in bronze, appeared in 2017. His latest book project, Considerations, will appear in the fall of 2020, and that has actually already happened. Finally, he's a member of the board of directors of both Culture Montréal and the Canadian Coalition for Cultural Diversity. And you can find his website at fortneranderson.com. Our first poet today, Derek Webster. Grew up in Oakville, Ontario, received an MFA from Washington University in St. Louis. He's the founding editor of Maisonneuve, an award-winning magazine of arts, opinion, and ideas, and he works as a freelance editor and teacher of poetry and prose. His first book of poems, Mockingbird, published by Vehicle Press in 2015, was a finalist for the 2016 Gerald Lampert Award, and his poems have appeared in the Boston Review, the Walrus, the Malahat Review, and elsewhere, and he lives in Montreal. Without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Derek Webster.
Thank you very much, Sonia. And thank you, Gabriel, and to the Stanstead Arts Center for having me in your poetry series. I've been following it along this fall and really enjoying the events and the combination of poets that you've featured. So thank you for including me. And it's an honor to read with Fortner Anderson as well. Fortner and I are going to be doing 2 sets each of about 10 minutes, I think. So you'll hear from us both twice. Okay, so I'll start off. I'm going to be reading in my first set poems from my book, Mockingbird, which I think Sonia mentioned and Gabriel mentioned as well, had some nice comments about it. So I'll start with one of the early poems in that. It's called After the Breakup. I was beside myself, living alone in the country where my grandfather lived, in a farmhouse built with 5 or 6 in mind. I didn't have a job and felt the shame of one too young to understand the gift of time. I wanted to be seen and loved for who I thought I was, or might be soon. I went for walks, read about war. How hollow my days seemed. Boring, I was boring. The Highland cattle chewing and staring in the leased fields next door became my proof that I was there and still worth looking at. Anger scared me, especially my own, so I threw orange tennis balls against a cinder block divide behind the house whenever the silence became too much. In the fall dark, I saw the form that fed the cows. It never talked to me, just turned to look, did not resume his work, until I trudged far past the field. Young men are seen as dangerous, no matter who they want to be, or the beauty of their partial thoughts. It took a dream for me to leave that place. Profiles against a sky, a lantern's eye, robins plunging beaks into my body's field, tugging out worms. And me, evicted, Caliban, a borrower, not owner of the land. This next poem is called Canning Time. It's a short poem. It's a childhood memory. Canning time. Baby cucumbers lifted from the garden. Tomatoes, peppers cooked with onion. Strawberries boiled in pectin. The mother worked, the child watched. For each thing, a jar from the box. Pour the melted wax on top. Across the counter, a regiment of jars conveyed, without a word, downstairs. Stacked 3 deep, and still there. Yeah. So this next poem is a bit of a departure. It's based upon an ancient Egyptian bas relief that I once saw in the Royal Ontario Museum. And it's a poem about some figures on it. This is called Egyptian Archers. In Egyptian art, one archer stands for all archers, their contour drawn from his thigh, his shin, his chest, his bow and quiver, a deck of desires slightly spread. Archers are technicians. This frieze shows their discipline, how they draw as one, their almond eye a blank, calm as the strings on smile, sure of their mission the moment their missiles release. They think, soon I will recline with my lover and lyre again, the bow's tension gone, the twang becomes strum and gentle stroking, the hand that leads, not hungry for battle's bloody plain, but parting curtains softly to a bed where my quiver will subside, incense slowly rise, and the drum only of rain and conversation, not war, not plucked Assyrian eyes. This arrow will save my life. Yeah. So after that brief foray into ancient art, we're going to go back to the countryside. This is another memory of sorts. It's called A Country Tale. One night, my great-grandfather got lost in a storm between the barn and the house. The mountain snow snuffed the light. He turned back to the barn, not 50 yards behind him uphill, and slept the night between cows. In the morning, he crunched home and made plans to sell the house, the barn, and all the rest. His wife didn't say a word. It was war. There was no help. They moved on. This poem's called Zombies. Love, stop collecting. Please change. But you don't seem able to give up. Keep turning over chits of who we were. A fur hat, a ticket stub, dried flowers, the Henry James you didn't read. All is fear, lost joy, and never sleep. And I can't stop looking. I'm a hawk in some old tapestry, eyeing the bodies below my tree. So I called this book Mockingbird because there are a lot of poems in it about birds, and it wasn't really my intent starting out, but as I put the collection together, I just started to notice how many there were, counting them. And so this poem is called Pelicans, and here it is, Pelicans. Don't fool yourself. You don't know anything about birds. So you've seen a documentary, skimmed a book, can tell robins from chickadees. You've stared across canyons, been pushed off a fence. You can guess what soaring is, falling in reverse. But have you ever looked at a pelican? Their beauty's folded awkwardness, red, lidless eyes, mouths baggy as inflatable pants. Their webbed feet push the brakes midair like cartoon ducks. No cormorants, no sleek arrow hunters. They wheel above the surf and drop like a stack of 20 pancakes, gulp at foam and fish, then struggle to take off again. Drying out on shore, they wonder what they've done to deserve such graceful wings. You should wish to be so brainless, inefficient, beautiful. You drove through a flock once on your way to catch a plane. Flying alone, no longer among them, you've returned to knowing nothing about birds or who you are, just eyeing other people, wondering what you've done to deserve this life, your only one. So this is the title poem of the book. It's called Mockingbird, and it's the last poem I'll read in my first set here. This is Mockingbird. I don't need you to tell me why I'm here, or solve the mystery of how I slipped so far and came to, lost in a snickering wood. Your trill, my sole directive. No bewigged guardian of the law will ever compliment my patience or sense of beauty or your eloquence. Like you, I'm playing with a kingless deck, bound to songs that others made. And with my life, I sing out the pale result, my reputation the heavy coat of a Victorian postman. Kindness makes me angry. It's rough justice. Now we've reached the final spoofing call, when you parrot the morning bell, melody dug in, song fuse set. Then that spine-deep tingle that bursts in your abrupt last line. Enlightening darkness, slowing time. Thank you. Over to you, Fortner.
Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks to the Stanstead Art Center as well for the invitation. I'll read a selection from the 1,000 Memories. Here we go. Once I was witness to many ordinary, unfathomable things. Once I had 2 useful warts on the palm of my left hand. Once I did it in the middle of a footpath in Golden Gate Park. Once I said a few solemn words over irrepressible giggles at the back of the nave. Once I got violently sick on a train from Vancouver to Seattle, a frenzy of shit and puke, often at the same time, for hours, but over by the time of our arrival. Once I made a solemn oath to the Queen in a room full of hopeful people. Once I went every Sunday morning to the first evangelical free church on Chicago Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Once I saw on a fishing trip to the Lake of the Woods. On my first trip to Canada with my mother, my brother, and my stepfather, an impossibly large muskie in the murky water beneath our canoe. Once I knew all the state capitals and the names of 36 presidents. Once I took the Amtrak train from Montreal to Los Angeles with stops in Schenectady, Chicago, and Albuquerque. Once I thought, Fortner Anderson, what a great idea. Once I came to an unhappy realization about the capacity, the intelligence, and the honesty of my fellow travelers and myself. Once I gave little credence to the advice and instructions of my elders. Once I looked for solutions fruitlessly. Once I used a false name, Michael McDonald, for a temporary identity as a cinema projectionist. Once I found on my way home from grade school an advertisement for pornography with small forbidden pictures and 2 unfamiliar words, prone and supine. Once I wanted a bullet and a gun, fire and flood, catastrophe and apocalypse, Armageddon and a fresh, clean start. Once I told myself with increasing effect, lie after outrageous lie. Once I put my faith in political leaders like Walter Mondale and Eugene McCarthy, and after discouragement in the arguments of the Trotskyists and Maoists, and later in the armed struggle of the autonomistas, and after more disillusion in art and literature, and finally at the end, after continual disappointment in magical thinking. Once I meant serious physical harm to my carpenter buddy Clark after one of his numerous pranks, this time a 1/4-inch staple into my defenseless butt, a perfect immobile target under a kitchen sink. Once I became obsessed about the death of my lit cigarettes for fear of their fatal retribution. Once I left a puddle of piss in the front seat of a red convertible. Once I worked out the real reason for a kind offer of breath mints. Once I needed a briefcase in hand at the start of every workday. Once I felt the gaze of lonely old men on my skinny young ass. Once I seemed conceited, arrogant, pompous, smart aleck, presumptuous, smug, vain, and egotistical. Once I asked our Heavenly Father fervently but unsuccessfully for a small miracle, a delay of just one more day. Once I showed a curious growth on my tongue to a dermatologist. Once I tried a skin pop in the hours shortly before dawn with a friend now dead. Once I called my father after his traffic accident and subsequent long stint in the hospital after a silence of almost 20 years. Once I kept a distance as a matter of course. Once I provided a consistent stream of poetry and progressive politics to unknown listeners via the radio. Once I held in high esteem 2 poets, one an anti-Semite and the other an unrepentant fascist. Once I turned 58, unsure of the consequences. Once I followed the career of the mighty Harmon Killebrew, Hammer and Harmon, 40 home runs in a single season and a rival to Babe Ruth, but on our team, the Minnesota Twins. Once I began each day to the cries of unhappy children. Once I bought a pound of Oaxacan weed for $90. Once I liked pungent cigarettes made with Turkish and dark tobacco, Balkan Sobranis, Gauloise Bleu, Turkish Specials, Nat Shermans, Chesterfields, Gitane, Export A, Players Lights, or the lighter American blends like Winston's, Marlboros, Lucky Strikes, Camels, Pall Malls, and in a pinch, Cools or Salem's, often almost 2 packs a day. Once I vomited most of a whole jug of Mateus sweet red wine onto the gravel shoulder of the Pacific Coast Highway. Once I helped my 300-pound father slowly and carefully, one step at a time, up the 4 stairs to the entrance of his mobile home in Tucson, Arizona. Once I started up again my affair with cigarettes after a short cooling off period, just for the pleasure of it. Once I ran every day on the sand at the edge of the surf from the Santa Monica Pier past the inkwell to the awry pylons and empty attractions of the Pacific Ocean Park Pier. Once I wrote protest letters to school principals, newspaper editors, government ministers, tyrants, dictators, and presidents. Once I set fire to paper airplanes, wet with lighter fluid and fat with match heads, for short flights and disappointingly small explosions in the dry grass beneath our third-story bedroom window. Once I moved with my brother, my mother, and her new husband from our apartment in Santa Monica, California, to the suburbs of Des Moines, Iowa, then to Bloomington, Minnesota, and on to Bellevue, Washington, and then back to Santa Monica in the space of 24 months, a couple of years before high school. Once I played the alcoholic preacher in a junior high school drama production. And once I paid tribute to Jim Morrison at his grave in Père Lachaise Cemetery. Back to you, Derek.
Thank you so much, Fortner. That was a wonderful, wonderful poem to hear. Thank you. Wow, how to follow that up. These are going to be some poems from my, these are unpublished. These are some new poems. This first one is, it's called Dresden. As Mahler's Fourth Symphony moves through the air, I think of my grandfather down on one knee in blue overalls, tools on the floor next to him behind the ancient refrigerator. He would sit painfully through events like this one, a tuxedo fundraiser, more social than beneficial. His mind ungrounded, still in the war. So much still needs fixing. I see the grand chandelier falling. Bass, kettle, truthful drum. Even the bomb jaded must have known the tone was wrong, each ear listening as the overture clattered and hummed for 3 days, more than 2,000 planes bursting through the walls of their homes. Tonight, I remember the country boys my grandfather trained to fly at Centralia and Summerside PEI. I see them turning, pulling the lever of the bomb bay doors, feel the knife of cold air at their throats as the tonnage drops, whistling in the darkness onto a million civilians and refugees, their eyes growing red as crystals as they reflect the firestorm igniting all around them, and the wet surface of their tongues melting with silent lessons. What remains are unbearable trials, ashes and shadow entities, white thoughts with small parachutes, trumpeting their own burials. This next poem is called Marina. It's about a woman I used to know, a wonderful woman, and who passed away, and who lived in Slovakia. So this is an elegy for Marina. Part 1. She met me at the bus stop, and we climbed the long hill to her family home. In winds that pushed us up beside the chestnut trees, below the crown of forest and covered ruins. My backpack bright with badges, sewn during long nights on trains and buses, clacking through sheep in County Galway, fields of spinach in Surrey, a cheese town in France. Street urchins through the window as the train pulled away toward the eastern reaches, the sweet beers of Prague, neo-Nazi skinheads in the subway at night, slowing to pass Romany villages, then onward into Slovakia, ending there. We hiked the Tatras, took refuge in goat breaks from passing storms, sang Ave Maria in the shelter, ate borscht, cooled our baby pink feet in mountain streams, compared our sores. All that time the cancer worm was burrowing outward, taking back her years until finally, between blue sheets, it met Marina's shaven head and took back the day she was born. Part 2. To think now, I kissed you awake in your sleeping bag, like some apple-bearing boy in grammar school. You put a hand on my forearm. That was enough. You knew how warmth could slow a person down. Your own ambitions, I barely remember them. Sometimes I want the water to rise, cover our heads. I'd walk the ocean floor then, cross Atlantic ridges, and follow the Rhine to knock on your door, to hear Yoho on the banjo, Seki with his accordion, and Katerina starting another song. I sent money, sent the mail express, wrote cheery postcards, said, don't fret, scratched it out, tore up the card, started again. You crawled into the lap of your aging mother, a cold lamb seeking shelter. Then you couldn't eat. Then what was the use of talking when the doctor said, it's up to her? You drew the clouds over you like sheets. The worm became a wolf and took great bites inside you. The machine pumped air lungward. How much more? Soon, they said, no more. When you died, I was on a lake, drinking beer and sailing with a friend. So this next poem is called Emergency Operation in Clouds. I took the title from a flying manual I found online. Emergency Operation in Clouds. Songs are too happy, sermons too long. Poetry whispers through the cream and the fear until the spin of service calls us to attend. We raise our right arms and scribble a promise, asking language to stand in our stead and fix the burning engines of the underworld. I'm here to say the white wall is growing. Even as I speak, our cries are turning back to themselves. So this next poem, it's called The Writing on the Wall. It's about graffiti, and it's about a graffiti cleaner. As you know, every city gets a lot of graffiti on walls all the time. Some of it, of course, we love, and it's beautiful art. But some things the city does choose to clean off. So this is a poem about graffiti cleaning. It's called The Writing on the Wall. They're still finding Byzantine phalluses and armless breasts scratched out by iconoclasts in the ancient alleys of Constantinople. But short of killing every child at 14, Nothing can stop human beings jiggling their can of can't on city walls. Hence, a graffiti cleaner in Montreal, blasting red brick with high-pressure water, his green hose snaking to a van where a generator, running hard, deafens the public courtyard. Rain-slickered, ear-guarded, he ports a neon vest. We value safety scrawled on its back in French. The white hiss stops. The cleaner drops the metal handle and turns off the generator. Peace descends upon the dead-end Ruelle as he returns with a smaller hose and portable tank to coat the scrawled curves and folds with a translucent soap, his steady spelling overwriting Vive le Québec libre. Earlier today, he washed off Fug it and Baise-moi, stencils of skulls and tanks, a dozen dicks, one whore, 3 gang tags, 3 Anglos go home, and a dozen amours. Hose in hand, pressure narrowed, he sprays, and detergent flares into writhing foam. The wall Rorschachs into pictures, white trails in the shape of palms, firework bursts on La Fête Nationale, a cartoon Rasta's head of dreadlocked hair. The cleaner stands in the small lake of froth and foam his job creates, and the generator cuts. A secular silence fills this passing civic moment as the toxic soap sinking into soil kills whatever plants are growing there. Letter by letter, word by word, the graffiti fades. The cleaner smokes, half disrobed, leaning against the van's bumper. Then he picks up his orange cones, slams the doors, and drives away. Already, the dark stain is lightening, the sentiment draining from brick and mortar. You'd need knowledge a priori, or an outsider's sixth sense to detect the dream lately here. But wait a day. Long enough for someone to fail a test, or get drunk, get fired, hear a speech, lose a brother, hate a girl, shoot police. The words will reappear. The writing on the wall is always there. This is the last poem I'll read in this section. And thank you very much for listening to these poems today. This is called Poetry. We will forever be standing. Excuse me, I don't know, I misread that. Let me start again. Poetry. We will forever be finding our own ways to it, like young deer making new paths through the forest, going left, going right, pushing back branches which invite our bodies around a stubborn, wet stump, across the bog, the scattered bones, back to the art, each spring a tired brown line. Through repetition, it becomes an art one lives in mind of, even the times startled by accident into beauty. Ancient and young, we feel again our hunger rushing by. Thank you. Over to you, Fortner.
Thanks, Derek. I hope we'll have the occasion to meet, and I'll be able to hear that work in person one day in some green zone future. These next poems are a series of sonnets. Here they are. We court untruths of benevolent rebellion atop disconnected stratospheres of meanness, portentous thrones between chalk pits, scrambling new pessimisms, claws. Like sapiens, like surprised ghettos, we host infection. We evaporate bucolic rapture on everyone's abdomen. And the old-time story found within was set aside while money emulsifies. My repetitive progenies sounding unfriended chapels, hosting tweed payback. Our salaries, shit work, nursed on triumphs for corked magpies to verbalize. I'm a belfry, brainwashed obscenely, of puppets and polarized hemorrhoids. But courteous oceans have victimized my entrails, obscure. Both must overrule. You, corrosive down-market caterpillar, have lodged in the swag and can customize, deposit crowing fear, so that we might wander in the arteries mindlessly, or replace it if it must be crumpled. But yeah, it must be displaced. Dang, the miles of fuses and satires have scrutinized and made it tired. Let my arsonist lurch and shampoo me, Grandpa, with leaden ideas of exhausted fireballs which rout the algae. The ashtray congealed occlusions. The stories bawled the ace. You mouthed the thalassic inconvenience, engrams of sadomasochism that surfaced on tips, golfed on cakes, kaput messiahs of value, square relatives who fomented delaminated strictures. Joe, warrior, your chronicled sin. Beans, beans, your reliquary ales. Cope the bully, irrelevant, with unnoticed heft. Peppers, goats, and the old-time type's confidence, the finest intoxication. While mad debtors browsed and climates pricked, he never remanded their functions not to wreck, to race, or to freeze. Factors roved and stared. Quite a quintessence expectorates on frenetic panels for a yellowed monkey trellis. We lollop eidetic fury. Confuted like looms, they forecast an imprecation, an ensign that disgracefully sighs, setting forth how a prosaic existentialism clips innocent jurors. Progressing solidly in the hall. My voice in her towering solid trout, the assignations of criminals, spinning amalgams in the solid, as falsehoods canter and unburden on cardinal underlings. Solid, so solid, the motive's salvage soars, so solid as perjury's checkmate, so solid its gangs, resumed in the bankrupt commands and the aquifers, their mansions blurred, solid in jazz, worthy. These vagrants, solid, fascist. In her apostolic cause, the taste of iterative amity, solid. You declaim thoughts in ambrosial chinos. They said, coming weakness and shortages dash to Xanadu, fitful in skittles, vacant a lovely township, whose braces and snuffy buttons and sleepless drummers induce theses that narrowly mature, which recur shouldered against injustice, the gourd that bowed and the felt hat that thieved, about the plain clothes these gray suits caucused. Our Cree sees more squad cars, collateral, instill barbs, on giddle and standardize, nothing jumbles, akin to the mercy of that darker puddle, cramped and gap-toothed, the attempt crackles syllabically. We will splatter dipole abstentions of unwillingness like fabled drills, and hairless Sabbaths upon shocked heights, described by mother's retro bidet, connecting gals to crooked tabletops. The orange wolf's moonshot risks discrepitation, which will scatter aspirant rattlesnakes in jetties of chastisement, chez Neptune. In the high-pitched herds of cordless barricades, latched managers will urinate upstage, like acquainting cloisters, chafed castaways, and knotted subtractions. Pushing Eden will mortgage, hawkish or perfoliate, chatoyant drugs and grass post-mortems. Yes, biology absized bunting, and their discourse quarreled. Your ovations compensate and searched the four, her ducal flange and graphic amenity, shuttling about aware and drizzling over meanings. And perverse caveats of nachos will greet you like centenary surveillance, and cannons too. Yet do not mitigate the reckoning that has his melanoma magnetized within. That's from a new book of sonnets, several quadrillion of them, that will appear probably this spring or fall, depending on how the pandemic plays out. Thanks, Derek. Thanks, Gabriel. Thanks all of you who attended this reading this afternoon.
Thank you to you both. Gabriel.
Yes. Well, it's been a really quite an extraordinary event, extraordinary readings from both of you, Fortner and Derek. Thank you so much for your readings and for bringing to us your poetry that has been extraordinarily moving and extraordinarily stimulating. Nice to hear your new poems coming out, Derek. And I'm not sure if you were reading your first read was from your 1,000 memories and 1,000 sentences, Fortner, but there was just quite a tremendous string of, beautiful string of words. And I just want to say that I really hope that a lot of people will tune in on this one when it gets onto YouTube. I think really it should be really heard by many. So we'll try to make sure of that it reaches people. So thank you so much. And next week we're going to have two poets. It's going to be one in English and one in French. It's going to be Katja Grubizik and Nadine El Taif. And they're two, yes, that's who it's going to be. It's going to be on the 12th of December. So I invite you all to come back and continue this. It will be the 8th, and we go on to the last one will be on the, that will be it, because after that we break out and we'll be back on the 16th of January. Anyhow, let's get on with one at a time. And thank you again. Great to see you guys. Hope to see you around, of course, when things loosen. And thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Luce Couture, and Stanstead de Stanstead. Okay, I'm not thanking Stanstead. On behalf of Stanstead de Stanstead, take care. All the best.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you very much,
Thanks.
Patty. It's very nice. It was so lovely to read you. I'm looking forward to digging a little bit and reading you for myself again. For those of you who joined us a little later, the information about the upcoming event is on the chat box if you are on Facebook. If you are not and you would like to be invited to our events, my email address is there, Sonia Patenaude communications with an S @gmail.com. Thank you for those who expressed their lovely comments in the chat box there. We look forward to seeing you again. Questions, comments, put them in the chat box or write to me, Sonia Patenaude communications @gmail.com. Have a lovely weekend. Bundle up, the snow's coming. Take care. Bye-bye.
Ik vind het